Welcome into episode 82 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tacek.
Remember the Seinfeld episode where the group wondered how long was too long to keep saying Happy New Year? It's hard to argue that the end of March is still the new year, yet looking at the calendar, the year's pretty young. So it is amazing the level of new threats that we've already seen in 2018. Just a couple of months ago, we took a look back at the state of Apple security in 2017. At that time, there was so much to cover that we ended up splitting it into 2 episodes. That was Checklist 71 and 72, if you want to give those a listen. And we already have a feeling that 2018 Security's year in review might end up running even longer. That's right, 2018 hit the ground at such a breakneck speed and hasn't let up when it comes to new threats targeting macOS and iOS. The good news, new security tools have also appeared to help fight the fight. On today's checklist, we'll cover some of the threats and some of the new tools to beat them. Items on the list include Coldroot, Shlayer, a cryptocurrency mining app found in the Mac App Store, LuLu, an open-source outbound firewall, and finally, Mozilla locks Facebook in a box. So I'm guessing the first 3 are bad guys, with LuLu and Mozilla moves wearing the capes. Start us off, if you would, guys, with Coldroot.
Well, back in mid-February, security researcher Patrick Wardle was doing some research on older attack methods that Apple has since mitigated. One of those attack methods was actually something originally used by the Dropbox desktop application. It would grant itself elevated permissions by modifying a specific privacy database maintained by macOS. Now, in the course of his research, he decided to search VirusTotal. That's a collection of malware samples, and he looked for references to that specific privacy database file. Most of the results were various pieces of malware that security researchers were already aware of. But there was also a file that had been uploaded to VirusTotal back in January, and it wasn't being detected as malware. The file was named com.apple.audio.driver.app. And despite that kind of long technical-sounding name, it did not come from Apple, so that naming choice was most likely made to trick unsuspecting users into trusting it as something that had come from Apple. When a user attempted to launch the app, it would prompt them to authenticate with their username and password, and then it didn't appear to do anything else besides that. But behind the scenes, it was doing a bunch of shady stuff. First, it would install a launch daemon, which is used to ensure that the malicious app is automatically launched every single time the computer is rebooted. So even if you force quit the program or basically try and get rid of it, there's this hidden file deep on the system that is bringing it back to life every time. Once it's running, the malware would contact a command and control server looking for further instructions. That's pretty normal behavior with malware these days. And after that, it would also start logging keystrokes and saving those to a file. A bunch of other capabilities were discovered with this malware. Again, all of them are pretty common these days, including listing, renaming, deleting files and directories, listing, executing, or killing processes, so quitting programs that are running on the computer or launching them or getting information on them, uploading and downloading files to and from an infected computer, getting the name of the current active window. So that would be useful for the bad guy if they wanted to know that, hey, this person's on their bank website. Now I want to pay attention. So they could get the name of that active window. And then at that point, there was also a capability to perform remote desktop monitoring. So basically screen captures, everything that's on the user's screen is then streamed to the attacker. So it'd be like they're sitting, looking over your shoulder at what you're doing on your computer. And finally, there was also capabilities to simply shut down the infected machine. It's kind of an odd one, but sometimes, if they want to stop somebody from removing the malware or for any other reason, maybe the computer needed to be rebooted for additional capabilities, they can just force that shutdown.
Now, you said this wasn't being recognized as malware before. I assume it is now, which is why we have a name for it and we know about it and all that fun stuff.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Next on the list, it sounds like a metal band, but it's even more sinister than that. Talk about Shlayer. Shlayer?
I believe that's how it's pronounced, Shlayer.
I want that shirt. I know a guy who makes these funny sort of like tech shirts. Maybe a Shlayer shirt wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Now, who got to name this one?
I believe that was the folks over at Intego, actually. Now, apparently, malware writers were really busy this past winter. They had nothing better to do because this one also was discovered in February, very shortly after Coldroot, I think within a couple days. Security researchers at Intego discovered it and named it, and it was being spread on file sharing sites, and it appeared as a fake Flash player update. And so that's partially where some of the naming convention came from for Shlayer. And there's another aspect to it, which we'll get into in a minute here. So you know, at this point, you might be sitting here thinking, oh, okay, well, hey, gee, I don't use file sharing sites. I don't pirate my software. I'm not at risk, right? And while this particular one was being distributed through pop-up ads on file sharing sites, which is really common behavior with malware, it doesn't mean that's the only place it could have been coming from. We have seen many different malware variants over the years that have come disguised as Adobe Flash Player updates. It's an extremely effective way to trick users into downloading and running the fake installers. Shlayer also used shell scripts, which can be used to execute command line instructions without the need to open up the terminal app. And that's, if you ever see the portrayal of hackers on TV or in movies, they pull up that window, they start typing cryptic commands, and all of a sudden the bank is hacked and all the money's gone. If you're sitting at your computer and suddenly a terminal window popped up and you started seeing all this stuff flying by on the screen, it might let you know something's wrong. Well, with these shell scripts, it actually can run those commands without anything appearing any different for what you're seeing when you're sitting at your computer. So you wouldn't even know they're running, which helps keep the malware undetected a little bit longer. Intego detected 3 different variants, each of which was associated with a different Apple developer program account. So that $99 account that you pay Apple for, and you get a code signing certificate back to say, hey, my app is on the level. Well, yeah, they paid for at least 3 that they or stole 3 that were legitimate at one point, and then used it for bad stuff. There were also 7 different domains that were associated with the malware. So, okay, the question would then be, how do you avoid something like Shlayer masquerading as a fake Adobe Flash Player update? The very first thing to do would be to avoid Flash Player completely, unless you absolutely need to have it installed in the first place. And it's not installed by default anymore. And Safari throws up a bunch of warnings. A lot of websites still do use Flash. A lot more are migrating over to HTML5. But, sometimes there are still some of those sites that you absolutely have to have Flash installed in order to use. So in that case, you can get Flash Player from the official Adobe website. The only problem is it's not exactly known for being bug-free either. I mean, that's the official version. There have been more than its fair share of security vulnerabilities in the past for the official Flash Player app. So even if you have it installed on your computer, that the legitimate one, that could actually be opening up to some security vulnerabilities as well. So keep that in mind before deciding whether or not you want to install it. But again, if you absolutely need to have it installed, make sure you're getting it directly from adobe.com. Do not trust any of those pop-ups you see when you're surfing the web saying you need to install or update Flash Player. If they appear, a random pop-up on your surfing website, don't trust it. Just go straight to Adobe's website and download it and install it yourself. Alternatively, you could actually use a browser that comes with a built-in copy of Flash Player, which is maintained and kept up to date by the browser developers. And Google's Chrome web browser is an example of that.
The next item on the list is something that I think we discussed the possibility of just a few weeks ago. They found now, though, a cryptocurrency mining app in the Mac App Store.
Yeah, we were talking about that back on episode 79. We were discussing cryptocurrency mining that is being done by some websites using your web browser to do the heavy lifting. During that episode, we discussed how there hadn't yet been any apps in the App Store that were secretly mining cryptocurrency, but that we didn't know if that was due to a lack of effort on the part of the bad guys, or if Apple was actively stopping those type of apps from getting into the App Store in the first place. Well, we have our answer, and it looks like Apple wasn't guarding the App Store as closely as we would have thought. Near the beginning of March, Dan Gooden from Ars Technica noticed a Mac app in the store called Calendar 2 that appeared to mine cryptocurrency in exchange for free use of what were normally paid features. The developers were at least upfront about what they were doing, offering users the ability to unlock all advanced features for free, in which case Calendar app unobtrusively generates cryptocurrency in the background. Now, there were a few problems with this. First, there was a fairly good chance it ran afoul of the App Store terms of service that each developer agrees to adhere to. Second, the app is set to mine cryptocurrency by default. Users need to go in and disable the setting and thus lose access to advanced app features in order to avoid the hit to their hardware. Finally, there were a couple of major bugs with the implementation. The cryptocurrency miner would run indefinitely, even after the user changed the default settings, and the miner consumed vastly more resources than the developer originally intended. Some users reported 200% CPU usage when the app was running. Dan contacted Apple to ask if Calendar 2 was in violation of the App Store terms of service, and 24 hours later, the app was still available for download in the Mac App Store, and Apple still hadn't replied to Dan. Once the news hit that the app was engaging in some pretty shady business practices, one-star reviews started flooding in. And shortly after that, Apple forced a developer to pull the app from the Mac App Store. In the takedown, Apple did confirm that the app violated Section 2.4.2 of the App Store Review Guidelines, which specifically states, "Design your app to use power efficiently. Apps should not rapidly drain battery, generate excessive heat, or put unnecessary strain on device resources." The app has since returned to the Mac App Store, minus the cryptocurrency mining capabilities. The app developers apparently made about $2,000 in cryptocurrency mined during that period that the app was actually alive. But considering the average rating of the app is sitting at 1.5 stars, that probably doesn't make up for the mountains of bad press they got out of the whole situation.
You know, I went to order food the other day, and then the app gave me the ability to pay in Bitcoin. Sorry, I was amazed. That's the first time that's ever happened. It's interesting. They made $2,000 in cryptocurrency. And years ago, you might have thought, wow, $2,000 in cryptocurrency. Heck, last year, you might have thought $2,000 in cryptocurrency. And now I see that, and not unlike you, Mr. Rob, I'm like, wasn't worth the 1.5 stars, though, was it?
Wait, what app are you using to order your food from?
I can't remember. It was like Uber Eats or something. And it was like just one you pull from the App Store. I mean, it was a regular app, but yeah, they were like, hey, pay in Bitcoin. I was like, yeah, no, because if I had... Anyway. All right, let's move on to the good guys. Meet LuLu, an open source outbound firewall app. Well, actually, you guys have already met LuLu. Won't you please introduce us to LuLu?
Sure thing. Well, we've already talked about firewalls on previous episodes of the checklist, but let's go over a brief refresher on what a firewall actually is and what it can do. A firewall is a piece of software or hardware that monitors network traffic to or from your computer, blocking traffic that meets certain criteria as suspicious or outright malicious. Firewalls come in a couple of different flavors, inbound and outbound, though there are also some that can handle both inbound and outbound traffic simultaneously. Inbound firewalls look at the network traffic from outside sources that are trying to connect to your computer, while outbound firewalls look at network traffic originating from your computer headed towards outside sources. Depending on the specific rule set for the firewall, it might block repeated connection attempts to your computer on the same port, or it might be set to block outbound traffic from a company computer to known malicious websites or command and control servers. Your Mac actually has an inbound firewall built right into the operating system, and that can provide a good defense against hackers trying to break into your Mac from outside sources. But what happens if the bad guys are already on the inside? Now, obviously, that's not a situation anyone would want to be in, but an outbound firewall can stop malware from phoning home and will also alert you to that attempt. And it can even just show you how many various connections all of your apps are trying to make to the internet at large all of the time. Most of these connections are perfectly benign, so you don't want to just block everything, or you'll end up causing more problems than you solve. And that's actually probably one of the most likely reasons that Apple only ships Mac OS with an inbound firewall rather than an outbound one as well. We've previously recommended a third-party outbound firewall called Little Snitch. However, there's now a new kid on the block in the form of LuLu, which is an open-source outbound firewall. LuLu was developed by Patrick Wardle, and yes, that is the same Patrick Wardle we mentioned earlier in this episode, and it's been available as an alpha version for a while. While alpha versions of software are great for computer enthusiasts who are comfortable surfing the bleeding edge along with all the potential bugs and problems that can come with early release software, most of us like to see our apps come with a certain level of polish. And the good news is that LuLu recently received a bunch of under-the-hood improvements, including an installer with a user interface. Previous versions you had to install manually from the command line. So it'll officially be released as a beta version in the near future. And the really cool part is, since it's an open source project, anyone with some coding chops can actually contribute to making it an even better firewall.
I know it's not beta yet. I don't know, though, would you normally suggest beta software? Because it kind of sounds like, this does not sound like officially 100% endorsement, but you sound excited about it.
It's exciting because for a couple of reasons. It's open source. There have been a couple. I think there's a previous open source outbound firewall a couple of years ago, and that ended up getting bought out by one of the security companies. So to have a project like this that is open source that solves a pretty important problem, it's exciting to me as a developer. As far as beta software goes, yeah, I mean, if you if you don't know much about computers or you don't feel very comfortable being in a situation where there might be crashes or bugs or problems, just wait till it's officially released. However, if you kind of want to, take a chance with some new software, give it a try, and you feel like you'd be the kind of person who wants to give feedback to the developer and help kind of shape the path of a project, beta software might be for you. Just definitely go into it with the understanding that it's not going to be perfect. There probably will still be some bugs. But as long as you're going into it with that in mind, it can give you early access to some pretty awesome capabilities.
Last item on today's list, something I think we've all been considering over the past few weeks. Mozilla has locked Facebook in a box.
Yeah, Facebook definitely has been in the news quite a bit. In fact, we did a whole episode on some shady behavior by Facebook. That would be episode 81 of the checklist for those keeping track at home. Well, it turns out that we're not the only ones getting a bit annoyed by Facebook's lax attitude when it comes to user privacy. On March 27th, Mozilla announced their new Facebook container extension for the Firefox web browser. The purpose of the extension is to help keep your web activity out of Facebook's hands by isolating your identity into a separate virtual container. This makes it harder for Facebook to use third-party cookies and track your online browsing habits across the web. Now, when the extension is installed, it deletes any existing Facebook cookies and logs you out of Facebook. The next time you visit Facebook, it opens a special container tab in your web browser, which you will then use to log into Facebook and use it like normal. If you click on any non-Facebook links or manually enter a non-Facebook URL in the address bar, the page will load outside of the container. Likewise, if you click on any of those Facebook share buttons on any of your normal browser tabs, it will specifically load them within the Facebook container. However, you should be aware that when you click that share button, data on the website you shared from will still be sent to Facebook like normal. There are a few potential downsides to the Facebook container, however. If you've used your Facebook credentials to create an account on a third-party website, it might not work properly anymore when you want to log in. When you've logged into Facebook in the container tab, any websites that display embedded Facebook comments or like buttons outside of that container tab won't actually work. And that's by design and prevents Facebook from associating your browsing activity on those websites with your actual Facebook identity. The best part about this whole situation, Mozilla feels so strongly about user privacy that they don't collect data from your use of the Facebook container extension apart from the number of times the extension is installed or removed. Maybe we need to start some sort of award system here at SecureMac because Mozilla deserves a big thumbs up for taking a strong stance on user privacy here.
I am really going to be curious a month from now what kind of conversations we're having about Facebook. I'll be really curious to see if the general public is having conversations like, yeah, it was difficult, but I got off of it. Or is it going to be back to, did you see that cute cat video on Facebook?
Now, you did remove your Facebook account, right? Elon Musk, deleted everything.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, Elon Musk can do that, can't he? I'm sorry, Elon Musk. I mean, first of all, he can buy all the advertising he wants. He sent a car up into space. And people know who Elon Musk is. I think probably just as many people can get in touch with Elon Musk as Elon Musk has always wanted anyway. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would imagine in the coming weeks, we're going to actually have more conversations about Facebook because as big as we thought this story was when we talked about it last week, I think we were aware that we were really just scratching the surface. And iceberg doesn't even begin to describe how much was below the surface once we all started looking into it. But that'll be for another show for another time. As for this show, if you want to dive deeper into today's topics, a good starting point would be our website. Look for episode 82 on securemac.com/checklist. You'll find notes there for this show and every show that's come before it. securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.